As government announced yesterday, more than 14,000 prisoners will have their jail time cut. This means that 9% of South Africa's inmate population could be placed in remission. The president uses the powers vested in him by the Constitution and the Correctional Services Act to grant remissions, which effectively means cutting the sentence short. It also means fast-tracking the dates inmates will be placed on parole, subject to meeting a set of criteria based on good conduct. It differs from a pardon as it still acknowledges that a crime has been committed. Golden Miles Bhudu of the South African Prisoners Organisation for Human Rights joins us here in studio via Cape Town studios. Is Vanessa Padayachee from the National Institute for Crime Prevention and Reintegration of Offenders, Nicro. A very good evening to you both. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Good evening, Mr. Piso and the viewers.
Okay, but let me start with you, Mr. Bhudu. Obviously, this would be, from your organization's perspective, a good move.
Of course, yes. We as an organization wholeheartedly welcome these special remission in this announcement. And it has been a long time coming. It's, in fact, long overdue. But we are told that the reason why the president has decided to pardon offenders is because, besides the fact that our prisons are chronically overcrowded, and that has for years infringed on the rights of sentenced and unsentenced prisoners, when one referred to Chapter 2 of the Bill of Rights, Section 34, subsection 2, paragraph J, which is very explicit when it comes to the rights of sentenced and unsentenced prisoners. And we understand the reason why the public is up in arms, because nowhere in the Constitution would I go and quote chapters, sections, subsections, and paragraphs if it comes to the rights of those who has been violated by those who find themselves behind bars. But we will get there someday, although we, many years ago as an organization, submitted a document called the Victims' Rights Charter. That charter should have now been taken through the mill to an extent that we were going to talk about now of the rights of victims constitutionally, so to speak, but we almost there.
So when you say, what is that a departure from, just in terms of the current Criminal Procedures Act, including Constitution? What does it suggest that's different?
Well, you see, if we had the resources, we were going to spend most of our time in the Constitutional Court arguing about the fact that Chapter 2 of the Bill of Rights, Section 35, subsection 2, is been violated because overcrowding is chronic. It violates the rights of sentenced prisoners. And as a result, medical treatment doesn't come easy. Reading material, exercise, and nutrition don't come easy because the system is overburdened. And I would like to have said this when it comes to the rights of victims, but unfortunately I can't do that because I'm not guided by any constitutional prerogative to do that.
And you'll forgive me for just to be clear, so the Victims' Charter, does it speak to the victims themselves, or when you talk about violated prisoners?
Well, the victims'
Are you equating the two?
You see, if you take the Freedom Charter, you read it and you'll see that some bits and pieces of the Freedom Charter in the Constitution, and we should have liked to have bits and pieces of the Victims' Charter in the Constitution. We are, of course, aware that the Department of Correctional Services years ago has started the victim-offender dialogue, but that is at the tail end of the whole process. They should have started at the head, where when you become a victim from day one, the state takes care of you in terms of counseling, medical assistance, reparations, accommodations, and so on, and then take you through the process to follow up until such time one day the perpetrator gets released from prison.
Let me just find out from Nicro. Ms. Padayachee, what are your sentiments about this? Mr. Bhudu speaks about the chronic overcrowding, and government certainly has admitted or, acknowledged this, but it's only 9% of prisoners that will really be taking out of the system.
Yeah, Sapiso, from our side, obviously there is an overburdened criminal justice system. Mr. Bhudu is right. Overcrowding is an issue. 9%, it may make a difference. And I think what was interesting about the President's special remission is that he had said he would look at remand detainees. and especially those who cannot afford fines. And I think we're very excited about that option because the remand detention population is the one that is most overcrowded. So I'm not sure what percentage of people are sitting in prison who cannot afford to pay fines, but I think that's really, a good initiative on the part of the president.
And I'm just thinking of the cliche, if you can't do the time, then don't do the crime. So members of the public who are victims of some of these criminals would then ask the question, why should people who go out of their way or who break the law then be given some sort of, reprieve just because they can't afford to pay for that?
Yeah, no, it may seem unfair, Sapiso, especially because, they have been to court, they have been sentenced according to the crimes that they have committed, and it does seem unfair. But also, like Mr. Bhudu said, there's a balance here of rights, and it is the rights of the victims, and people in prison have rights as well. And the overcrowding situation is really violating rights. It is not allowing for rehabilitation, because those who are sentenced for under 24 months, for instance, they don't even have a rehabilitation plan because of the overcrowding issue.
What do you do as an organization?
I think it will help, even if it's a little bit, to manage the prison population, but it's not the full answer. We know we've got to be able to deal with the backlog in the criminal justice system. I know there's a lot of effort by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development and the NPA looking at case flow management. They've really put a lot of effort into that, but we're not really there.
What do you do as an organization, Ms. Padayachee?
Of these, the ones that are going to be released now. The criminal record is a huge issue. So if people are released, they won't be able to get jobs.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Bhudu this question because you don't seem to be able to hear me, Ms. Padayachee. An organization such as Nicro, have they done anything for somebody who was in your position?
No. In fact, when I was in prison, we wrote letters, endless letters, for years on end, and we didn't even get response, let alone sympathy. And by the way, Nicro is funded by the state, and they are very donor friendly, and they should have started many years ago to make sure that there is adequate support structures. I'm not talking about manga business support structures where you, let's say we now have this announcement that some of those that will be released don't go and fall through the cracks because due to a lack of proper reintegration structures like halfway houses, daily reporting centers, one-stop centers and so on. But I'm very optimistic because the Office of the Minister and the Commissioner made it clear that a Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster will be established to monitor the implementation of this project, and we would insist and plead with the system to make this JCPS cluster a permanent structure that will, in fact, we've called for an amnesty resolution committee in 1995-96 already, when the late President Mandela, may his soul rest in peace, asked Justice Johan Kriegler to do investigation into the violence that erupted in our prisons in the early 90s. So we need a permanent structure. I
need to ask this question. Obviously, you would borrow from your own experience as a former inmate coming out of the prison walls. You talk about falling through the cracks.
Yes.
Just tell me, how does the system, so to speak, trip you up? What are you vulnerable to?
Look, you come out of prison and you've got four options. It's either you going to get a job which will be very difficult because of your previous criminal record. You will try and go and apply for a grant, which doesn't happen in this country. You will, in fact, also maybe just disappear, become a status of missing persons, or go and die and in some way get buried as a paupers, or you will just go and commit another crime to go back into the system where you will have 3 meals, you have a roof over your head and so forth. Now, because of a lack of support structures, that is how thousands and thousands of ex-offenders fall through these cracks.
I believe Ms. Padayachee can hear us now. How can you be more proactive, Ms. Padayachee? Mr. Bhudu here saying when he was in prison, Nicro itself as an organization wasn't much help.
Well, Sabiso, Nicro can't do it by itself. And I think, in the white paper it talks about corrections being a societal responsibility. So yes, we need to work in collaboration with the Department of Correctional Services, community corrections, other role players who are working with offenders, communities, families. So it really requires a massive cooperation amongst various role players. I don't think why people fall through the gap is we just do not have the capacity to reach everyone. So we have to do it together. And we are forming collaborative efforts with the Department of Corrections Services. We're looking at an ex-offender desk collectively, together with former offenders, to look at how we can get more support, coordinate services among role players, make sure that there's a support structure in each and, in community.
All right, thank you very much.
So we're looking at something, but it's going to take some time. We also developed a criminal record coalition, really looking at the issue of criminal records and the unfair discrimination when people have been rehabilitated, that they continue to be stigmatized and not be given an opportunity to reintegrate. So there is efforts happening, and we're going to do that in a coordinated and collaborative way.
All right, thank you very much. In our Johannesburg studios, Golden Mile Bhudu of the South African Prisoners Organization for Human Rights. In our Seat Point studios, you saw there Vanessa Padayachee from NGO Nicro.